It's the month of June, people are dying, people are paying taxes, and WBD is still WBD'ing. But this time, Warner Brothers Discovery's descent into the abyss could take AEW with it. After a merger with Discovery Plus did next to nothing to turn the company around, the always tumultuous Warner Brothers Discovery is now splitting into two different companies. One company will be saddled with $37 billion of debt and left to flap its arms and legs like Jack from Titanic. The other company gets to float to safety for now on a broken door. Guess which company AEW is likely to end up with? Under volatile leadership, an uncertain future, and possibly without one of its biggest supporters, you better believe the WBD split will affect AEW come 2026, no matter what sycophantic sicko says different. Today, we're gonna talk about the looming WBD split, why it's more likely to have a negative impact on AEW, and how the WBD split is eerily similar to the AOL Time Warner merger that killed WCW. Subscribe and Afro Romance.
AEW sucks right now.
WBD finally announced its long-awaited split. As the long-struggling network continues to be suffocated by debt, box office bombs, and movie cancellations, its latest strategy is to split into two different companies, WBD Global Networks and WBD Streaming and Studios. Long story short, WBD Streaming and Studios includes movies and streaming services like HBO Max. This arm will be run by longtime AEW ally David Zaslav. WBD Global Networks will be run by WBD CFO Gunnar Wiedenfels, and it'll essentially be the sports and news division anchored by legacy brands like CNN, TNT, and TBS. Unlike Streaming and Studios, Global Networks will be saddled with $37 billion of debt. It's also the division most likely to end up with AEW, the Jack Dawson division. AEW's unpaid PR interns like BJ Bethel launched into immediate damage control, but I've heard enough from that goof because bum-ass BJ is the same dork who reported AEW was adding 500,000 extra viewers on Max. Anybody without Tony Khan's adult diapers in their mouth knew that claim was bullshit. Even David Zaslav begs to differ.
On that question of percentage of viewership on HBO Max in the US, it's about 25%.
Think of this WBD split as an amicable separation. Not necessarily a divorce, but it's like two parents who are legally married but live in separate homes, like the McMahons. If you're reading between the lines, Gunnar Wiedenfels has primary custody of AEW. David Zaslav will be around, but as the head of Streaming and Studios, Zaslav will only have visitation rights. No different from Aunt Rachel's relationship with Little Richie. This is not a good sign for Little Tony and AEW, because Uncle Zaslav oversaw AEW's come-up last year when they signed a $500 million deal with WBD. Now AEW has to move in with Gunnar Wiedenfels. Nobody knows what the hell he thinks of pro wrestling, and as your garden variety white man, white collar executive, chances are Gunnar Wiedenfels looks down on pro wrestling. Even if he doesn't, Gunnar is a consummate CFO, a position that requires disciplined spending, ruthless budget control, and cost cutting. Variety described Gunnar as an iron-fisted money manager, the face of cost cutting in WBD. A man who constantly finds new ways to cut old costs. Last year, Gash and Gunnar got a bonus from shareholders for delivering almost $2 billion in cost savings. Uh-oh. Gunnar is celebrated by WBD shareholders for the same reasons they hate David Zaslav, but we'll get to that soon enough. Remember, Gunnar's WBD Global Networks company has acquired $37 billion in debt, and AEW still stands to make hundreds of millions of dollars through 2027. Come 2028, AEW will have an option worth around $200 million. I'm telling you right now, at the very least, that option gets restructured. At worst, not only does Gunnar not pick up that option, he'll shoot down the whole company altogether. These are the same niggas who canceled Batgirl. Gunnar will not hesitate to pull the trigger and blick AEW. Gunnar Wiedenfels is giving me Jamie Kellner vibes already. And if you know who Jamie Kellner is, that should make you very nervous if you're one of those sickos with over 100,000 tweets. Gunnar reminds me of how a fictional foreigner, Richard Germain, bought the network that aired the Larry Sanders Show and threatened to replace the late-night staple with Cheers reruns.
I don't want to put the show back on. Larry walked. I put on back-to-back Cheers reruns on the spot, and they're doing rather well. Better than Leno, as a matter of fact.
All right, this is bullshit.
If gashing Gunnar has anything to do with the death of AEW, well, put it this way, Gunnar is from Germany, and the sickos are mentally unstable, so you fill in the blanks of what those tweets are about to be like. We'll be calling that man Gunnar Wiedenfels real quick. One of the biggest questions facing AEW is, will WBD consider AEW a sport? If so, AEW will end up with WBD Global Networks. This would be a red flag for the company for a number of reasons. The looming debt attached to global networks, the uncertainty of habitual cost-cutter Gunnar Wiedenfels and how he views AEW, and also the fact that WBD seems to be cooling off on the whole sports thing. Warner Brothers Discovery unloaded the NBA this year, and on an investor call, David Zaslav said sports wasn't a real driver.
Inside the U.S., sports has been less critical. It's viewed, but it hasn't been a real driver for us.
If AEW is indeed considered a sport, that means WBD sees them as an insignificant driver, like Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Real talk, from where I'm sitting, Global Networks is starting to feel like that portable classroom at the end of the school where they hide all the kids who misbehave. Even if AEW isn't considered a sport, it's hard to imagine how they wouldn't end up with WBD Global Networks. AEW airs on TNT and TBS, where they get the majority of their viewership. They also air live, similar to a sport rather than a movie or streaming TV show. Even if they somehow end up with Daddy Dave in the streaming and studios department, Mr. Zaslav doesn't have the best job security right now. David Zaslav was recently voted the most overpaid CEO in 2022. And even more recently, WBD shareholders voted against Zaslav's $52 million pay package in what Variety called a symbolic rebuke. Zaslav is hated on both sides of the WBD spectrum, from the shareholders who think he makes too much to the fans who thinks he takes too much. He took away Coyote versus Acme, he took away Batgirl, he's about to take away Cartoon Network, and they took the life out of a once great Joker franchise under his watch. For one reason or another, AEW might not have Mr. Zaslav in its corner headed into a crucial negotiation period where not only will WBD be looking to cut costs, but they'll also be looking to de-emphasize live sports. If AEW doesn't find another suitor quick, they could be up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, or in Titanic terms, up Atlantic Ocean without a door. The streaming bubble is about to burst, and these conglomerates are losing their ass on bloated streaming deals. Only a few of them, if any, will continue spending all this streaming money for such little return, especially when it comes to secondary wrestling companies like AEW. 2027 will be a landscape devoid of streaming services willing to pay AEW what it got to air on WBD, which, to be fair, WBD only overpaid for AEW because WBD is a fucking disaster. All they do is overpay. They were literally voted #1 in that department. That's why they're in so much debt. At this point, AEW better hope to black Jesus that they can parlay their pay-per-view partnership with Amazon into a streaming deal. Dave Meltzer loves to talk about how much money the Khan family has, which means AEW will never go out of business because Tony Khan's too rich and has too much love for pro wrestling to kill it. But going out of business is the last thing AEW should be worried about. What they're facing is way worse than that. TNA never really went out of business. They just floated around in obscurity from one irrelevant network to the next until they quietly died with their eyes open like total non-stop zombies. TNA only came back to life when they partnered with WWE. ROH never technically went out of business after ROH foolishly co-promoted the biggest pay-per-view in independent wrestling history without signing any of their biggest stars on that show to a contract beforehand. Tony Khan swooped in and AEW signed away the elite, thereby turning ROH into a ring of zombies. Tony Khan was stealing ROH's whole flow way before he stole New Japan's whole flow.
He copied my whole flow! Word for word, bar for bar!
ROH was still technically in business post-Elite. They were even funded by Sinclair Broadcasting until Sinclair pulled their funding, only for ROH to be purchased by Tony Khan. But unlike TNA, ROH is still just as irrelevant as it was before it joined forces with a national wrestling company. Tony Khan is a wrestling-obsessed billionaire with enough money to keep AEW running past its expiration date. I'm sure Tony Khan will gladly pay to run AEW for the sickos. That's all he's been doing since 2022. And every year, AEW's viewership gets closer and closer to a sicko number. It's gotten to the point where Tony Khan is literally responding to trolls in Twitter focus groups in the middle of Dynamite. If AEW is a casualty in the WBD split, which is very likely, AEW will become a well-funded indie. The living dead. WCW with a trust fund. Check out this video and subscribe. Will AEW survive the WBD split? Tell me in the comments!